we have this legislation that's effective on July 1st, and a lot of the impact to your communities is going to be in the confusion for interpretation of this bill. And I know a lot of Bob's police chiefs are asking him for different interpretations of the bill, and I think that's happening all over the state. And I think one of the detriments to writing poorly crafted language is that you'll have 102 different interpretations of how this bill should play out. But the body cams is, I guess, the biggest thing that people know. The police chiefs are not opposed to body cams or even universal body cams. We're just looking for some way to fund that. We don't have a good metric yet about how much this is going to cost the state of Illinois. But I know from Lemont that we can't afford to implement a body cam program right now, and I think Bob right now with his resources can't afford to manage it with state's attorneys. How many state's attorneys did you think you need, Bob?
I asked for 27 additional state's attorneys. So I have 80 right now.
Yeah. So the cost of this of the body camera is enormous. But then there's other things in there right now that, you know, any mistake on a body camera for a police officer is a class 3 felony. Well, who wants to wear a body camera if they turn it off accidentally and they're potentially guilty of a class 3 felony? So there's the task of rewriting this bill is monumental. Some of the other language in there, and I think a lot of things in this bill were not intended. They have unintended consequences, and it's just a consequence of poorly written language. Right now, they've said that any Class B and C misdemeanor cannot be a custodial arrest. So, you know, think of a trespasser. If you're a business and somebody's trespassing on your property, the police now could come and arrest them and remove them. And typically they bail out right away. Well, under the new law, you could only give them a ticket and you couldn't remove them. You could give them a ticket and then leave. And if the trespasser didn't leave, I guess you can come back later and give them another ticket, but that's the limitations of what this law says. And I think that's one of the extreme examples that's likely to change, but that's a consequence of poorly written language and language that bypassed the committee process. There are a lot of changes in riot control and use of force and the use of force weapons. There is certification and licensing to for police officers that we support, and we think there are some potentially some positive aspects of this law if we can just get the language written properly. So I guess I could go on. I'm probably running out of time, huh, John?
Yeah, Chief, Chief, you want to say something in closing, but I think we got a lot of good questions to get to, for both you and State's Attorney Berlin to address.
Yeah, why don't we go to those then?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the questions. Kelsey, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and put a few in there, and if you can kind of track what we're missing, would be great. But to State's Attorney Berlin or Chief, first question I would have is from Angelica Linares. How do we address the opioid crisis so those numbers start coming down? It seems like nothing is really working in terms of reducing numbers.
I've kind of described it as the same issue we had with DUIs, and it took, unfortunately, about 30 years to change the culture of drinking and driving. I'm hoping it doesn't take that long. I just think we continue to educate people. We continue to educate the public. We try and get drug users into treatment so that they don't commit other crimes, and we go after drug dealers. It's a combination of all those things.
And the only thing I would add to that is that opioid, unlike a lot of other addiction paths, involves the diversion of legal opioids. So a lot of the addicts start with diverted pills that are sold at school or stolen from their grandmother. So one of the things we can do is get unused prescriptions out of the houses, and then they migrate when they can no longer get access to those, they migrate to heroin.
So next question I want to pose to you too. Actually, this is directed to you, Bob. Mr. Berlin, this is from Ryan Clarkson. When you refer to that big increase in armed robberies, do you know if the offenders are using guns they obtained legally, or are the guns obtained illegally?
Yeah, most of the armed robberies are committed with guns. Most of those guns are obtained illegally. We find, I'm not aware of a case where a legal gun owner or a concealed carry holder commits a crime like an armed robbery. It's very rare.
Okay. All right. Thank you. One question to me, Senator Curran, since the criminal justice bill has already been signed by the governor, what influence will you be able to have on the task force you were appointed to? There was a task force that is going to study constitutional issues involving policing, including qualified immunity. I'm serving as the Republican Senate member on that task force. Certainly will be working in conjunction with Chief Maton and State's Attorney Berlin. That task force is going to take a wide, we haven't started yet, it's going to take a wide breath. In terms of having influence on the criminal justice reform bill signed by Governor Pritzker in January or February, it's likely to have little to no effect. I think what the purpose of the task force is to drive the legislative narrative going forward. In terms of the current law that was passed, there's going to be a separate process that Chief Maton alluded to in terms of working with the sponsors of that legislation and some other members and individuals in the law enforcement community on trying to come up with some language, trailer bill language, to clean up a lot of these unintended consequences of the bill. And, if I could take a moment, I just want to expand on what the chief was mentioning and that process. And the process in which that bill was passed in January, that was a piece of legislation, initially 854 pages. It ballooned to over 1,100 pages, and it was released on a Thursday, and it passed the following Wednesday with several iterations, and it passed 4 in the morning was when that vote took place. It did not go through a normal committee process, as the chief alluded to. So I serve as our Republican spokesperson on the new Senate Ethics Committee. And yesterday, a ethics omnibus bill was posted to that committee and by the chair of the committee, and was debated 12 hours later. However, much more narrower bill in scope. And in committee today, what we did was we went through the actual language in the legislation and talked about intent and potential unintended consequences, including, there was a section involving lobbyists and the possibility of having duly registered entities with the same principle lobbying separate levels of government. And just talking through that. That's the type of process that we really as legislators need to engage in. So there's a clear understanding of, one, you want to respect and understand what the bill sponsor intends with the language they put forward. Two, how is it actually likely to be interpreted by any reviewing court or any entity or government entity that needs to effectuate that language. And three, are there unintended consequences? Are there obvious loopholes that, we should recognize now and not wait for someone to exploit down the road and read about it in the front page of the Tribune, and then it's a call to duty again. So that was the process used this morning. And we have a long way to go on that. I'm not trying to sideline that, but I think that's the process that Chief Maton kind of alludes to that really, I think, produces our best policy. You know, at the end of the day, the majority is going to decide, you know, what the public policy purpose is of a proposal, but we want to make sure that the actual language that we're voting on and enacting into law actually matches that, and everyone has a understanding of what that is. Sorry to sidetrack that, but that is what really lacked in this process, and therefore there's been a lot of discussions, negotiations, work done between the law enforcement community and the sponsors of the bill, and we're still not there yet to attempt to clean a lot of this up. We're going to move on here. From Paige Smith, Bob, I think this is addressed to you. With changes to the criminal justice laws and limits placed on judges, do you think judges will err on the side of caution and keep more accused people in jail while they await trial, or do you think more accused people will be released while they wait for their trial?
That's a great question, and I think a lot depends on what part of the state you're in, what county you're in. But I think the goal is to keep violent criminals in. I think that's the purpose of the law, and the language really has to be tweaked. And I believe there is a willingness, obviously, to fix some of these problems so that we keep the violent ones in, the nonviolent ones out. But I really do think it depends on what county you're in. We're going to have more violent criminals hopefully detained. The nonviolent ones will be out on bond.
And a follow-up on that, is there, well, one, I guess, does cash bail make it more likely, if someone posting a cash bond, make it more likely they appear in court than having no posted bond? And is there any data on that would support one way or the other?
There is data. There's a number of studies that have been done. I know that the chief judge in Cook County had a study that was published that the Tribune criticized. There's other studies, so it's you're not quite sure exactly what to believe. I can just tell you what I have seen in DuPage County, and I put those numbers up earlier. When we went to that Category A, Category B, and a lot more defendants were out on bond, on recognizance or very low bonds, our failures to appear went up dramatically. So again, based on that, I believe we're going to see more failures to appear as we move forward with this law.
Chief Maton, the next question's for you, and I know you touched upon this, but I think this is incredibly important, and so I want to just make sure everyone heard some of the tips you had. But what are the steps I can take to minimize chances of home invasion or a home burglary?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing would be there's a lot of devices on the market now that are cameras, that are smart cameras, and you can get alerted or check when you're away the condition of your property. So I think that's the number one thing. Fortunately, there's very few home invasions. Most burglars don't want to be confronted while they're burglarizing houses. So the key is to target harden your own house. So I would make your bushes and any of the areas right around your house so that folks can see from the street if somebody is sneaking around, or certainly can't put a ladder up. I would do things like put smart locks and smart cameras inside and outside your house, and I guess getting a dog is always a theft deterrent.
Thank you, Chief. There was a question, I covered the task force, but someone did ask Senator Curran the slide showing that those accused of robbery, burglary, DUI, and death and kidnapping, DUI with a death and kidnapping, can't be held in jail. And again, this is pre-trial. They're not eligible for a detention hearing. If they went to a detention hearing, a judge may or may not hold them under the new law, but they're just not, the judge is not even able to exercise any discretion there and consider a detention hearing under the new law with those crimes. But is there a chance through the task force that'll change? I would say with the task force, no. It is the change would come about with the trailer legislation. If there is trailer legislation that we're all hopeful we're going to get to. State Attorney Berlin, the increase in carjackings is alarming. Why do you think this crime jumped so high so fast? And then I think Chief Mayton, there's a follow-up there that I'll direct to you.
Well, when there's an increase in crime in Chicago, unfortunately, we see an increase in the surrounding suburbs. Carjackings have been up dramatically in Chicago. Most of the carjackings that we see in DuPage County are committed by people coming out from Cook County or elsewhere. So that's one of the reasons. I believe one of the reasons we're seeing more juveniles committing this crime is it was in 2016, the General Assembly removed armed robbery with a gun from the automatic transfer to adult court statute. So it used to be if you were 16, you committed armed robbery with a gun, you were going to be tried as an adult. When they took that away in 2017, Chicago had over 1,000 carjackings. 70% of those were committed by juveniles. And that has continued. The gangs are using the juveniles to commit these violent crimes. They're stealing cars. They're taking cars and carjackings, and they use those cars to commit other crimes. So I believe that that's one of the big reasons we've seen such an increase.
And then, Chief, you did touch on how to make yourself less of a target for a carjacking. You know, a question came on the board, and I just want to make sure no one missed that because I think that's incredibly important information. So the question was, how can I make sure I'm safe from carjacking, and what do I do if I'm the target of carjacking? Could you just touch upon that again, Chief?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll put these tips up, and I got a lot of these from, right now it's on the Orland Park Police website. So if you can go to the Orland Park website, you can find the larger list of them. I think the awareness of your surroundings, and that if you believe that somebody's targeting you, either before you get to your car or after you've been in your car, you know, drive to a place of safety at that point. I think that's the biggest prevention tip. But I want to kind of follow up on a little bit what Bob was talking about. As the burglary crews started stealing more cars by finding keys in them, and they were delivering these cars to their gangs, they realized that these stolen vehicles kind of beat all of the deterrent system. So as they had witnesses in all these other crimes and they were in stolen vehicles, they didn't get targeted because they couldn't bring that back. And then the cars became more valuable. And then the number of cars they were getting on car burglaries just wasn't enough. So they needed to increase the volume of vehicles that they used so that they could use them in all the other crimes, from drug dealing to drive-by shootings to burglaries to everything else they're doing. So that's become the driving need right now, and why all of these carjackings have increased is they just need stolen vehicles and they can only use them for a few days.
Chief, this is another question to you. I worry about my kids' safety at school. Do all schools have resource officers? How does your department work with schools to be ready in case there is an active shooter?
Almost all the schools in this area have school resource officers, although there's a strong movement to prevent school districts from having police in schools. And that's one of the things we'd ask your support in. The school resource officer position has never been an initiative of the police departments. It's always the schools that come and request that type of a resource. And I think it has great benefit for both the police department and the school. As far as um, readiness for it. There are multiple drills done each year in the school districts. There's over the last few years, there's been a lot of legislation changing that, updating it, but both the school districts and the police departments drill frequently in it. There's also a lot of technology that a lot of districts are putting in. I know our high school just put in an alarm system through a mobile app that teachers can communicate if there was some kind of a school lockdown, and give information to the command post outside about what to give us a good crime picture of what's going on in the school. So there's a lot of resources to that, and the school resource officer is the integral part of putting those together and being the person on the ground. And remember, the reason that school resource officer programs started developing around the country is they thought it better to deal in-house with a lot of the problem issues versus calling the police. And the typical police response is you get a crime, the patrol officer goes and makes an arrest or doesn't make an arrest, and they thought that wasn't the prevalent process that they wanted to handle a lot of these, and they wanted to be much more hands-on and work with the students in a much more hands-on process.
And Chief, is there any data or studies out there to show that school resource officers inhibit crime, or in the opposite, are a source of more problems in school that you're aware of?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, but there has been some pretty public occasions in the last couple of years where they prevented school shootings and some other incidents like that by the proximity of that school resource officer.
Thank you. We are coming up on 7:30, and I apologize. I'm going to try to get one last question in. And Bob, this might have been someone that got on late because you did touch on this early, but it's really amazing to see the decrease in DUI charges in DuPage County. Could you just, you offered a few thoughts on what you attribute those decreases to. Could you just kind of summarize that again real quick? Because we got a question in here late. I'm assuming it's someone that got on late.
It's really a 25 to 30 year campaign, combination of public education and changing the Secretary of State, creating the graduated driver's license, changing a lot of these rules for younger drivers. But ride sharing, I think, has been a game changer the past couple of years. The Uber, the Lyft, these other ride sharing services have made it a lot easier for people who've been drinking to get transportation elsewhere. But I really think we've seen a cultural change, especially in the 16 to 25-year-old group. For the most part, these kids, I know that a lot of them are still drinking in high school, but for the most part, they are not drinking and driving. And that's a real good trend that we're seeing.
Obviously, we're not great on the drinking in high school. We're not endorsing that, but it's great that they're not getting behind the wheel and weaponizing vehicles.
Of course.
No. And I know you didn't imply that. I just,
right.
I want to thank you, State's Attorney Robert Berlin. We're very fortunate to have you in DuPage County. You're someone I've worked with very closely, both as a DuPage County board member and now as a state legislator. Thank you for taking the time in your service to our community. And Chief Mark Maton, getting to work with you and the folks in Lemont has been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking your time this evening and providing both of you great information, knowledge, and sound advice as well this evening. I want to thank everyone that got on this. I I apologize, we got to have a hard cutoff here, but I have to actually go to the floor. We are starting back up with third readings and voting on taking final action on proposals this evening. All the questions are logged in the chat, so we will make sure we get responses out to you. We will follow up and get through everything. I think we got through most of the questions, which is we're very fortunate to do so. And if there's any further questions or follow-up that come up after this, please contact my office, and we will get the answers. We will continue to work with Chief Mayton and State's Attorney Berlin on that and get you the information you're requesting. It is Senator Curran at gmail.com, Senator Curran at one word at gmail.com, and we will get that information. Or you can visit senatorcurran.com, my webpage, and submit through there. So thank you, everyone. Wish everyone to have a safe and enjoyable evening, and really appreciate you taking your time to join us tonight.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.